glory of God in the house of God. If God's glory was in the house, they would not go in the face of God and in the presence of God and in the church and stand up and tell lies. It couldn't happen. When the priest had sin in him, and he went into the holiest of holies, my Bible says they had a rope tied around him. Because if there was any sin in him, he didn't walk back out on his own. They had to pull him back out. You cannot go into the very presence of God, into the glory of God, with sin and rebellion and disobedience and irreverence for God and think that nothing's going to happen.
Right.
Adam and Eve did it, and they were kicked out of the garden. And they died when they were supposed to live eternally. When Moses built the tabernacle in the wilderness, he built it according to the tabernacle that's in heaven. People don't understand that today. He didn't just build something that never was, but he built an exact replica of the tabernacle that was in heaven.
Amen.
And the chevron that was there, and that chevron that stood there protected the glory of God. It protected the glory of God. You could not enter the presence of God unless that chevron moved aside and allowed you in. That's why that chevron was all over the tabernacle. When they sinned during Samuel's time, Ichabod was written over the lintel of the door. Ichabod means the glory of the Lord is gone. They took the Ark of the Covenant, which meant that those men were no longer in agreement with God. Covenant means agreement. The new covenant means God's new agreement with man. The old covenant was God's old agreement. But covenant means agreement. And the Ark of the Covenant, as long as it was in the presence of the tabernacle, as long as it was in Israel, Israel was walking in agreement with God. But when Ichabod was written over the tabernacle, when they came in and the Philistines took, and the Hittites took the Ark of the Covenant, the glory of God left Israel. And when the glory of God left Israel, sin came in abundance. When the glory of God left Israel, children became disobedient and rebellious, doing whatsoever they chose to do, disrespecting and dishonoring not only God, but their parents as well. America used to be a country where they honored their parents. Many of you young children don't know, because your generation, the glory had left the house of God in America, and reverence had left our homes and our families. You don't know what it means to honor your mother and your father, and you don't honor them. You don't know what it means to reverence God. But some of us in here knows what it means when we honored not only our parents, but we honored any older male or female. Children today, even those of you who come to this house, will cuss an adult out if given the opportunity, because you have no respect for your parents. And if you cuss out one adult, it's because you don't respect your parents. And you would cuss them out if you weren't afraid of a left or a right hook or a stick going upside your head. But those of you whose parents accepted, you will cuss them out. These are the perilous times that God spoke of when he said men would be lovers of themselves more than lovers of God. Disrespectful, unthankful, and unholy. There's so much that goes on in the house of God today, and God is not pleased with it. And the reason that it's going on, and God has not done anything, is because his glory is not here. You see people in the world do all kinds of things. And they seem to be getting away with it, but they're not. But God is such a just God that he will not hold you accountable for that which he has not taught you. The Hittites, the Philistines, they had the Ark of the Covenant. They put it on a cart and they drew it with a horse, and God didn't slay them. The Bible says when they put the Ark of the Covenant in there with their God, they woke up and their God was knocked down. They picked him up and the next day he was knocked down again. They picked him up and put him up there again. The next day he was broken. Because God said, I have no other God before me. He will not share his glory. He will not share his worship. He would not allow them to have another God standing up higher, or as if he challenged him. So he kept knocking him down. And when they were determined to pick him up and worship him, he broke and destroyed him. And then when David was taking the ark back, and David loved the Lord, but they went in and they got the ark. And they tried to bring the ark back on the cart that the Philistines carried him on. It shook, and Uzziah tried to grab it, and he did what? He died immediately. Because he could not touch the glory of God. He also, David was angry. Wanted to know, God, why did you do it? He was angry. But God let him know there is no reason to be angry. You're not doing it the way I told you to do it. The Ark of the Covenant must be carried on the shoulders of the priest. It was not to be carried on a cart drawn by horse and buggy. God set this thing up so that man would have relationship with him, that man would make covenant with him. So a horse and a buggy had no right to carry the glory of God, the Ark of the Covenant, representing the government of God. It rests on the shoulders of men. They died because they were trying to bring the glory of God home, the Ark of the Covenant home, but they did not do it the way God said do it. And